Welcome to How to Beat the Difference with your hosts, Johanna and Paul. A podcast for the career you want, or maybe just that push you need. If you want to know what your dream career looks like, join us to get inspiration from industry experts that will make that dream career a reality.
Hello and welcome to How to Beat the Difference with your hosts, Johanna Molina and
Paul Ensky.
Paul. That's you. How are you today?
I'm good. I can't complain. Joanna, how are you?
Of course you can't complain. You're about to take a couple of days off. Tell
Yes.
me, where are you going?
I'm going to the south of Spain. It'll be my first time out of the country since 2019 when I went to Munich.
Wow.
So it's been a while, but a well-deserved break, I think. Yeah. And I'm hoping it's all good. I've heard about crazy queues at airports and how it's a nightmare to travel. And, what I'm going to do now for the next little while is wrap myself in cotton wool and not go outside so I don't go near any sort of COVID floating around the air. But yeah, that's my plan.
That's so good. I'm so jealous and I can't wait to see all your photos in social media.
I haven't posted in years, but yeah, I'll change it for this.
Paul, so today we are diving straight into our podcast. But before that, we really want to invite everyone to please rate wherever you are listening to the podcast. Rate us and yes, let us know what else do you wanna hear about and who do you want us to interview. Today we have a very, very interesting guest. Let's go straight into it.
Yes, absolutely. I felt like I've gotten to know Esi over the last little while. I haven't spoken to her a couple of times, but Esi Gillo is founder of DIFFvelopment, a foundation that empowers global Black development. Esi is committed to re-empowering the global Black community by holistically empowering aspiring Black visionaries to disrupt negative patterns of history through personal development and entrepreneurship. If she had to describe herself in one sentence, she would say that she is passionate about all things authentic and puts nothing above our freedom. Esi holds a Master's in African Studies from the University of Oxford in the UK, a BA in Afro-American Studies and Psychology from Smith College, and a certificate in African Studies from the Five College Consortium. She has also studied in Uganda, Rwanda, and Ghana. Esi is also the author of Understanding How to Build Black Generational Wealth, a historical and culturally centered self-help book, and we're delighted to have her today. Well, you're very welcome along. We're delighted to have you. So how are you doing first, and whereabouts in the world are you now currently?
I am well, thank you, Paul. I am in Montclair, New Jersey currently, and it is very hot here. So can't complain, but I am hot.
Esi, we are so happy to have you here. Can you please tell us about your journey, your backstory?
Definitely. It's a pleasure to be here, and thanks for having me. So I was born in Montclair, New Jersey. My parents got divorced and I lived between here and West Orange, New Jersey, which is like 15 minutes away. And my father's a professor. His focus area is political science. He's also a Pan-Africanist. So I was kind of born with that interest in the Black community inherently, because I heard about it every single day. That was the premise of his work. He was always publishing. So he's from Ghana and my mother's from Uganda. And so I went back and forth between them growing up. And I always had a passion for psychology. And so Zoom to undergrad, I went to Smith College in Massachusetts. And I did take on a degree in psychology and Afro-American studies. And I did a certification in African studies. And at that time, I saw the trajectory of psychology. And I was like, I don't really think I want to get a PhD in this. I don't want to go that far. So I decided to go on and study more of my people. So I went to University of Oxford. I got a master's in African studies. And I thought, okay, what do I want to do next? My first internship experience was with the American Cancer Society. And that's only because it was like 5 minutes from my house. And then when I was in undergrad, I interned for Panafest in Ghana. And so that was another nonprofit. And I loved it. You know, the work was really dynamic. But when I was at Oxford, I remotely interned for a nonprofit that was doing work in South Africa. But even though that trajectory was looking like nonprofit, that is not what I was thinking about. I was thinking more so research space. I wanted to get into like a think tank and be a Black voice within that space, because those spaces are not dominated by Black people. And oftentimes the research is about Black people. So I was applying to things like the Council on Foreign Relations or UN agencies, Brookings. And I was really frustrated because I was getting the interest, but when I would get to the interview, I could see that they were disappointed that I was Black. They see Oxford, they see Smith, they see my name, they're kind of like, okay, yeah. And then you go in and you can kind of see the enthusiasm go down. And even though I was more than qualified, and I was seeing that a lot of my other Black friends were also struggling, and I saw them taking on weird jobs, like they went to good schools, did really well for themselves, did all the internships, and they're just taking on temp jobs and like really low level jobs. And it bothered me. And so I'm going through all of this and I'm really frustrated, and I refused to temp. I actually went back to this Black owned juice bar that I used to work at when I was 14. I worked there for some months after a long period of not finding anything. And then I eventually did end up at a startup nonprofit in Newark, New Jersey called the Center for Collaborative Change. It was fine when I was an intern, but this is not what I was envisioning for myself after graduate school. But I took it and I said it'll be a learning experience. And it was. It was not the best fit for me. It was dealing with a lot of Black urban issues in Newark, New Jersey, but the leadership was not Black. So I did that for about a year and I left. And then I eventually did temp. I gave in because I couldn't find what I wanted. And that's how I ended up in the financial sector. So, I mean, in the beginning, I did a lot of odd jobs. And then I ended up at SIFMA, which is Securities Industries Financial Markets Association. It's a lobbying firm, but they have a foundation, totally different from the nonprofit that I had just come from. And they were looking for someone to hire. So the idea was like, I would work there for maybe 90 days. And during that period, they would decide whether or not they want to hire me. And so I came in as the assistant. And when she interviewed me, the executive director at the time, now she's president, she asked me, why do you want to work here? And I was basically kind of like, I just need a job. I need to build my skill set. And then she said, well, what do you want to do in the next 5 years? I want to run a nonprofit like this one. And I was like, what am I talking? I had never said that before. It had never been a thought, but that day I said it. And she said, yes, we want to try her out. So that was a really, for all the young people out there, that's a learning experience too. Like sometimes just being yourself, not that I was always myself, but sometimes just really being yourself within reason, of course, can get you through doors that you wouldn't otherwise get through. So I worked there for 4 years. I was the only Black person on my team. I was also the youngest person on my team. I know some people take pride in being the only Black person in a space. I didn't. It wasn't something I enjoyed. So I learned a lot there. As far as just what I loved the most there was the juxtaposition between what I saw at a startup nonprofit and then one that was 40 years old. Like, it was incredible to me. I loved the order. I loved seeing like how their board of directors, how that was run, because when I was at the other nonprofit, I was managing the board of directors. Eventually they said, look, you shouldn't be in this executive assistant role. And I'm like, I know that. And so they hired me to be a program coordinator. So I was managing 5 states, reaching about 20,000 students, I think. And, but I learned so much because the job was very dynamic. Like, there was public speaking involved. There was professional development involved. There was like, and I saw a lot at that job, just as far as discrimination, and I saw a lot, and I know that affects people in different ways. For me, it was very much so like I knew it was a means to an end, so I didn't harp on it, but it was tough, like when you're working with a student and then their parents meet you and they're like, this is the person that's helping my kid, seriously, and you can feel it, or you're at a gala and someone you wash your hands with in the bathroom every day is like, what company do you work at? in front of like 10 people. And you're like, we work together. Like, I dealt with a lot there. And so I was not happy and I was complaining about it every day. And my fiance, I don't know maybe we were husband and wife at the time, but he was just like, you need to leave that job. Like, I don't care. I just don't want to hear about it anymore. And so we ended up working at this restaurant together in Montclair. And me on a more part-time basis and him more full-time, our goal was to pay off the student loan debt. So the owner wanted to franchise the business. And she had these big dreams that she wanted to do a nonprofit urban garden and all this stuff. And we were inadvertently helping her build this plan. And so as we're doing that, she's like, you know what? I want you to also help me with the nonprofit application. And this is when Peter, my husband, also co-founder, was like, no, if you're going to do their 1023, if you're going to fill out that form, you might as well do it for us. We should start our own nonprofit. We're both really passionate about the Black community, but we're also creative, artistic, and so many different things. So we sat down and said, how wouldn't it be cool if Black college students had the opportunity to consult for a Black-owned business, like the way we just did, like to help them grow. And as they're doing that, they'd also get to learn about business. And so that was kind of how the entrepreneurship was born. And that's our flagship program. So there was a lot of, in the beginning, it was all about the entrepreneurship because that was kind of our baby and that was the first idea. But then we said, we have to take this idea further. It can't just be consulting. They have to learn about their history. They have to learn. So there were these other things that came to us that we felt like were very meaningful. Okay, so besides the consulting, what else can they do? And we're like, you know what? They need to build their own business concept too, because when else in life are they going to get a chance to do that with people who actually can help them do that? And so this is kind of how that idea started growing. And then I said, let's put together our own curriculum. If it's a 10-week program, originally we were thinking 12 weeks. What do they need to learn over the course of that time that would allow them to be very aware of what they're going to experience when they graduate? They need to be prepared for Black life after college because it's very different. Everyone has a different experience, and it's important for us to be aware of what those differences are going to be. It's not enough to get the degree if you don't know that the color of your skin might affect what that degree is able to do for you. So we wanted that element to be there, like preparing them for that, but we also wanted them to understand why those issues exist.
That's super interesting. I want to dive deeper into those issues because when I first met you, I remember that we talked a lot about the history of African people, and you said there's a lot that we don't know. There's a lot of insights and things that people don't really understand. So could you please tell us what are those things that we should all know?
Absolutely. And so that ties in perfectly to our curriculum. So we felt like one of the reasons the issue of Black economics continues to be a problem is because we're not aware of our history. And it's not just about knowing the bad things that happen. It's also about knowing the good things that happen too. But more importantly, just all of the details and how those things come together to bring us to where we are today. So through our curriculum, and these are things that people should know, to go to your question directly, is just like understanding ancient African trade, right? We all study European history a lot, as if Europeans are the only ones who were trading or had a history during ancient times. No, it's always been a global economy. So what were Africans doing at that time? What were they trading? What were people going to them for, right? So we dig into that, getting them to understand that we've always been a world player. And this is what it looked like when we were a world power. People came through Africa for trade routes. They had to go through Africa. There were certain, we know that most of the resources are in Africa, so they were coming for that too. Now, one thing that African leaders failed to invest in was technology. And I think that sometimes when we explore the history, because we do it from a very interactive perspective, because you have to be active with your history, right? That's what we do in social studies in school. Why did this European leader do this? Or that's what we do with our students. Why did this African leader do that? Or why didn't we, when we saw that the Europeans had figured out a way to circumvent Africa and go straight to South America, why weren't we alarmed? Like, why didn't we try to come up with a different way to infuse our economy if we're just relying on people coming through trade routes and exports and things of that nature? You have to always, it's business. You always have to figure out a new way to be successful. And that those attempts seem to not be there the way that they should have been. So we explore things like that. How did things shift? When were things equal, and then how did they shift? Why? What were the different things at play? Then we also look at the diaspora, because that's very connected to the Black experience. Like, unfortunately, a lot of Black people don't know how they got where they are. So sometimes they they're very passionate to be Haitian or Jamaican or African American, whatever they are, but they kind of feel very disconnected from that being African. And sometimes they forget how they got there and how maybe the experience of slavery, whether it was in the Caribbean or in America, is a shared experience. And then also understanding that colonialism was a different form of economic exploitation, and a lot of slavery took place on the continent, and just kind of getting them to understand how those twin institutions are what led to the economic disparity that we see today. I mean, like, you can't go from being a commodity to instantly being equal, right? And so when you're talking about 400 years of slavery with the transatlantic slave trade, you're talking about 400 years of not being a player in the economy. And that's not even to mention, we also go into the East African slave trade, right? So also getting them to understand it's not just a West Africa thing. This has happened all around Africa at different periods of time, because the Arab slave trade, which also interchangeably is called the East African slave trade, even though it wasn't just East Africa, it was heavily in East Africa, but it was a kind of across the continent. That went on for almost 1,000 years. So that you have Africans living in India that don't know how they got there. And they've been there for like 800 years. And they're at the bottom of the economic stratosphere. They're below the undesirables, or whatever they call them in India, right? So what we do is give our students an understanding that whatever you think you're going through in Compton, California, or Newark, New Jersey, or wherever you are, every Black person around the world is going through the same exact thing because of these common historical issues that we're all connected to. And you can't disconnect yourself from your history, or you won't understand why things are happening. And so one of the biggest things that we also teach is just understanding the issue of automatic collectivity, which is something my dad talks about a lot in his work. And understanding that it's not that what you do doesn't matter. That's not it. But the reality is we're all connected to something, right? That's how the world is. If you're Asian, people see you through that lens, and they see you through that history. They may not think of it as in terms of like, oh, in 1855, no, but they see you connected to your history. And so because Black people have been divided in so many ways through colonialism, through slavery, we don't understand that people see us as one. And so that is challenging because we don't realize that the economic situation that we're facing is connected. Like it's a collective issue that we need to address together in some form or fashion, right? Whether you're in Jamaica or you're in Guinea or you're in South Africa, right? If you're to turn the pages of those history books, you'll see that Black people have been economically exploited and oppressed for a very long time. And what we do through our work is also beyond exploring that from a superficial lens, which is to just say, oh, we were oppressed. That's true. But what role did our leaders play in that? Because we all have leaders, right? So most of the time when bad things happen, it's because of failed leadership. So what were our leaders doing when all of this was going on? How did it happen? And so that is like the really hard, tough work that we explore through our entrepreneurship during the first week of orientation. We really dig into that history and we ask big questions. We talk about, how the transatlantic slave trade started in terms of understanding like, okay, so at one time, everyone was going through Africa for certain resources that they wanted or in order to get to certain places. Now, because of technology, they figured out how to circumvent Africa and just go straight to South America. They've annihilated the Native Americans. And now they're trying to figure out who's going to do the work. Who's going to do the work to build up this new world? Now, our leaders may have not been privy to that plan, but there has to be a point at which you can see that you're only trading humans and nothing else, right? Like no one is coming to you for anything else anymore because they're getting it in South America. They realized that the gold was there and the certain things that they wanted that they were getting from Africa were there. So at what point does a leader say, this is like becoming too much, right? So we explore things like that. We explore the leaders that did say it was too much. We explore how it was too late. When something has become commonplace and the law of the land, it's very hard to get out of that situation. So those are, if you really want to understand Black economics, you have to go into that history. And people don't want to go into that. They just want to say like, oh, that was a long time ago. Right. But we're still dealing with it right now, right? Because after all of those institutions ended, they evolve into neo versions of the same thing. It's only natural until there's some form of leadership within the Black global community that says enough is enough. And we need to do something for ourselves. We need to not be economically controlled by anyone. And so that's missing. And so what we're really passionate about at Development is inculcating youth with that spirit, first of all, of awareness, because it's not enough to know a little, you have to know a lot. And when you know a lot, you're not really angry. You're just trying to figure out, okay, now what can I do, right? So we fill them with all that history. And then we're like, okay, now you need to create a business concept. And that business concept has to inherently give back to some element of the global Black community. So either it needs to be a nonprofit, or it has to be a social enterprise, or a for-profit that has a philanthropic arm. And so that is how we get them to, in their own little way, start thinking about what they can understand, that they're agents of change. No one is going to do this for us. It's the young people have to start thinking about it, and they have to be passionate about it. And that kind of has to become the culture. And eventually you may get some really great leaders out of that. And so that's the business concept side. And then, once they go through that orientation, which is a lot, we then transition into like more modern day issues around the Black experience when it comes to business ownership and wealth building, and try to give them the tools and the perspective that they need to circumvent, typical challenges and just also become successful. So it's a great task, but we are really passionate about it. We have our own curriculum, which we are going to copyright. And it's been a journey, but yeah, I feel like I just said a lot, but
no, it's all good. Yeah, no, you've taken us on quite the journey. Colonialism hasn't been good to any of us on the call, but yeah, especially Africa, and they completely carved it up after the slave trade and all sorts of stuff. It's been a terrible, bloody history. Yeah. And I suppose there's just a couple of things that I want to hit on there, because you've really covered quite a lot. I've nearly just thrown out my notes. I don't need them anymore. But would you be like, I'd say it must have been an amazing feeling for yourself to go, like, because you're very much part of the culture and the community, and your father was, and what was that experience like when you first stepped back, or the first time, I suppose, into Africa? Did you feel a connection?
Yes, I love that question because I wasn't expecting it. Yes, so the first time I went, I was 14, and my dad was always like, my dad is just, both of my parents are interesting, but my dad was like, he was plagued by malaria when he was little. So he was always afraid to take me, or us. So he never took my sister or myself. He would always like go by himself. And so finally, I don't know what inspired her. I need to ask her, but my mom decided she was going to take me. And it changed my life completely in terms of, I grew up in a very, like, my mom's was very into the Ugandan community. So we had what Luganda is one of the languages, and that's the language that my people speak. And so we had something called Luganda school every Saturday. I don't know if any of us learned it, but we learned the customs, we learned the culture, we learned the dances, we learned all that stuff. And so I was very deep into the Ugandan community growing up. So we all felt very close to it, but it's different from being there and then meeting like your relatives outside of when they come to visit you and they're really uncomfortable with life here. So it's nice to see everyone in their element. And yeah, I just felt very much at home. And I knew that this was somewhere that I had to live, not just visit, because I see a lot of my mother's generation, they're now trying to go back because they're retired. And all they do is complain about America and how terrible it is and how it's bad for raising families. And I'm like, well, why don't you just leave? But I guess it's because of the trauma that they've had with certain things. Like, like some of them saw Idi Amin, they saw war, they saw different things. Some of them saw colonialism, like they were there, like they remember when they were being run by the British, and then next week they're being run by Arabs, and then the next week it's something else, the Italians, so they saw a lot. And so I get that. But I know, I feel I'm very passionate about the idea that we can't really do this work properly if we're not there. And so I know for me, I've always been passionate about living there. And it's funny that you asked, because I know Johanna knows this, but for the next 2.5 months, starting next Saturday, God willing, if we pass our COVID test and it's so complicated to travel now, but we're supposed to be in Ghana for the next 2.5 months, from September to mid-November. And the objective of that trip is to not only on a personal level, get a sense of because it's one thing to visit and be with family, right? And someone's like cooking for you, doing everything for you, driving you around. And you also just being on your own. So my husband and we're going to be on our own. We're like, no, we don't want anybody picking us up. We got an Airbnb. We will stay with family at some time, but we just want to get a sense of what it would be like to live there on our own with our daughter and run development. So that is the objective of the trip. That on a personal level, from a business perspective, there's no way we can say we serve Black people globally and we don't have a physical presence in Africa. I don't care what you say. That's not authentic. So we have to figure out who can we partner with there. There's so many great organizations. Which of them complement the work that we do? What partnerships can we grow? What sponsorships can we get, right? Our online resource center, one of the name of it is an Akan word. There's a lot of synergy with the work that we do. And I'm sure that we can get some local corporations to buy into supporting our work, understanding what that means from a business standpoint. Do we need to register there? So really doing the foundational work of what would it be like to be on the ground here as development. We have a lot of different ideas, but we need to, how it is. You can brainstorm all day, but you need to be there. It doesn't matter how long, like I've lived there before for like different periods of time, but that's different from like, I need to, like my dad is just like, it's a bad time to go with COVID and all. And I'm like, I get it, but like, I'm sorry, like your fate and your passion and business has no time. Like if I need to go now, I need to go now. I need to go now because I need to lay the groundwork. I'm also trying to grow my family. So I need to know what I'm doing. And so when I'm there, I'm going to be really focused on, can we have a headquarters here? Yeah, it's very exciting for us. Yeah.
Yes. And I look forward to working with you in some projects that we've been brainstorming. So good luck with the trip.
Yes.
And as you have just educated us on some of the issues that Black people face. In your opinion, how can we all contribute to a more inclusive world?
Ooh, that's a big question. I think honestly, from my experience, even just like what we're doing right now, right? Like I've talked to so many people. No one has asked me to have this conversation. You get what I'm saying? So I feel like, Johanna, like what you're doing, you know, like being interested in it and providing different platforms for people who are well-versed to speak on these issues from a solution-based perspective. Because I think right now, especially with the post-George Floyd climate, people are getting too comfortable just talking. And there has to be work. Like, what are you doing? And I think that talking to people who are actually doing something that is really worthwhile is best. I listen, I grew up with a professor and an intellectual. It's great, but theory will only get you so far. So it has to be connecting with people who are on the ground, doing the work, and investing in the youth. I think, not to say that older people can't make an impact, but it's the youth that have, I mean, I'm only 33 and I'm tired. I'm exhausted. So when I am like, man, if I started development when I was 18, I don't know where it would be right now. And I work like a dog, but it's the youth that have the energy to make an impact. So investing in them and also making sure that they are on the right path as well. Because you can invest in people financially, but if they don't know why or what or how, so supporting organizations that are doing the intellectual work needed for change to come about. You know, I think that a lot of people are passionate about Black issues, but I don't think they're not thinking on a global scale. And they're also not necessarily thinking about disruptive action that is outside of the norm. You know, like people tend to focus on politics and how they can make change through that sphere. But I think there's a lot of power in business. I mean, like, if you have a nonprofit and you do the work, you can, I mean, look at us, right? We're making change. And then even if you're a for-profit, you're bringing in billions of dollars, you better start that philanthropic arm and bring in the people who are doing the work. I think that replicating efforts is a problem in the Black community. Everybody wants to do the same thing, but they want to do it their way. And that's great, but people have to join forces. You know, you have to sit down and say, how can we amplify work? So I think, how can people help? Think of different creative ways that you can amplify someone's work. If you see it and you think it's great, how can we get together and amplify each other's work, right? Because you have your cause and I have mine, but I really love what you're doing. And so this is how I can help you. How can you help me? And just that type of thing. And understanding that it's okay to have two different causes. Like, we don't have to, you don't have to change your mission and I don't have to change mine. And I think that 2021 has been a year of blessing for development because we've come in contact with people like you and the Opportunity Network. Their CEO is phenomenal as well. And people who understand, look, I have my mission, you have your mission, but I like what you do and you like what I do. How can we come together?
Collaborate.
Yeah, that's it. Because that's how you amplify, you know?
Increase the impact. And I love that. In terms of collaboration, raising awareness, and definitely your story inspired me from our very first call. So thank you for your work. As a final question, today you mentioned earlier something that caught my attention, and you said, I wanted to see people that looked like me. And I agree definitely with the importance of role models. As a Black female founder, what would be your advice to other women, young people, and Black leaders out there looking for a breakthrough?
Go all the way. Understand that you're only going to get as far as you want to go. People will help you when you're ready to be helped. Sometimes we think we're ready for help that we're not ready for. And you can only figure that out when you've gone further. And then you're like, oh my God, if I got that $1 million, or, oh my God, if that person had helped me, I would have disappointed them. Because sometimes you just don't, just be humble and understand that if it's not happening, it's probably because you're not ready. But keep going, keep going, keep pushing, keep exploring different ways to get where you want to go. And don't ever let money rule you. Money is a tool, but it doesn't actually create anything. I always say that. I mean, like, what was the last thing that you know that money created? Nothing. So if you want to do the work, do the work. If you need to, there were times when I've worked 22 hours in a day before, and it was crazy, but guess what? The product was great. You know, this book, when I tell you how many times I read that, it was driving me crazy. And everyone was like, you're never going to finish. Don't talk to me about it anymore. And I was like, no, I found one typo. And if I find, because I have this thing that I have to read something 3 times without error to know that it's good. So taking that into a book was just a different level of I don't know what, destruction. But go all the way and work. Nothing is easy. Even the people you see that you think are rich, they work. And the people that made them rich worked. Working is inevitable. And the more successful you become, the busier you get. So there's no such thing as like, oh, I made it to the top, now I'm not doing anything. That just means you're no longer motivated. And that's fine, but that is not equivalent to being successful. Success is work, hard work, be organized, understand where you're not good at certain things, and try to find the best people who are. Mm-hmm. I know Johanna and I share this. I'm kind of like, I think I'm good at everything. Matter of fact, I am.
Did I say that?
No, but I know that you said like it's hard to let go of stuff, right?
Oh yes, I said that.
I'm saying it in a different way, but I can see that you have that spirit, and that's a good thing. Like you're good at a lot of stuff. Like you know how to, you can manage a whole world in your head, and that's great. But if you have that skill, still always think about when I can no longer do this, who can? Always think about the future. Like I've always been building out, how can someone else do this from the beginning? So that by the time where I am now, like I'm tired, like I'm like, I can't do everything. I already have those steps of like, this is how someone else can do it. Because it's really exhausting when you do everything and then you're tired, but you didn't write it down. Like, and now you want to hire people, maybe you even have the money to hire them, but you can't explain to them how to do the work. That is a disaster. So always think ahead, be visionary, think ahead, work hard. Think about the people who could do the work before you even have the money for them to do it, and never let money rule you. Money is a tool, but it doesn't, if you're passionate, the money will come.
I think that's an absolutely fantastic way to end it. I think you hit the nail on the head, and I've thoroughly enjoyed our talk today. I think we need a part 2 at some stage in the future because there's still so much we have to touch on. And Esi, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
That was Esi Gillo, and she has a fantastic, beautiful name, and I've pronounced it incorrectly already to her about 3 times, so I don't want to do it again, but she was absolutely amazing. Johanna, what did you think?
Oh, yes. I really, really admire her and her foundation. Can't wait to start also what we already are working together in some proposals, and yes, increasing access to Black students and the Black community around the world to the greatest opportunities. That's something really beautiful. And I think at some points of the podcast, it increases your empathy in really understanding what are those struggles that the Black community faces and how we can all make an impact.
Absolutely. And I suppose like from us here on the podcast, we wish her the best of luck. She is traveling and moving to Africa shortly. She could possibly be on the way now as we speak, and I wish her the best, and hopefully we can take her back in the future and have a part 2, Johanna.
Absolutely. And so, yes, thank you so much, Esi. Thank you, Paul. And thank you, everyone. You can reach us at howtobethedifference@theinterngroup.com or on social media @theinterngroup. And until next time.
Thanks a million. Best of luck.
Bye.